Hi, Steven.
Uh, so let us start our journey. So, in this journey, we have only one question: who am I? If there is a surprise element in your mind, what? Who am I? I know who am I. So, you are surprised and you are curious, you are committed to know who am I. Let me see what the teacher says, what the teaching says. That is the first surprise element in who am I. And if that surprise element makes you committed to the journey, you will never miss a lesson. What is the surprise? Surprise, it is a bigger surprise that one speaks about the real self. And there is a greater surprise that after listening, one does not understand who am I. Do you see that? There is a greater surprise. We cannot keep the real self in our hand. It cannot be objectified. You cannot say, the way I found the mouse, you cannot say, I found the real self. And it's a bigger surprise, even having that surprise element in our life, that I'm so much committed. Oh, let me know who am I. I missed the lesson. I only missed the lesson because because I'm having some stress. And the master says you are not made up of the stress. So I'm carried away by the stress and the duality and a conflict in my life. And that is why I miss the session. So miss the session. Surprise is that it cannot be spoken. There's still a bigger surprise that it cannot be spoken. And still the teacher continues to speak. Have you seen? I have been speaking, speaking, and speaking. Master teacher speaks about it, it cannot be objectified. Surprise, even when people listen to it and they realize it. So there are surprise elements at every moment in my life. Otherwise, what a big surprise. Last week I had a lot of stress, and today, I'm a little bit relaxed. Again, next week I will be in stress. What a surprise element in that. I've been doing the same thing again and again. Once the mind receives the knowledge intellectually and then internalize it. When you internalize, what a big surprise. The masters of the Eastern wisdom says, you are peace. You are not in peace, you are peace. You are happiness, you are love. It doesn't influence me. I know everyone says this, but I'm made up of this stress. I will continue to suffer. You see, there is a change in mindset. Once this mind is committed, I am the peace and happiness. Oh, I have realized it a bit. Terry said last time that the moment we finish meditation, our mind returns to the same old habit. Oh, let me return again. I don't have that sense of awareness. I don't live in that awareness. So the past impressions takes me there. I intellectually know it, but I do not internalize the knowledge. So the life gives you a surprise in any event, in a situation. Yeah, Dennis also talked about how to prevent awareness not to get carried away by objectification. This statement is also objectification. I have to leave the thought. I have to recognize what is behind that thought. So this master is saying, try, helps us to understand there is one consciousness all pervading everywhere at every moment. It cannot be undone. Why? Because it is not created by any action. Are you getting it? It is not created by any action. So, whatever the result we get through an action, it can be undone. You do the opposite action, it can be undone. So, when we understand that there is nothing to act, there is nothing to do the practice, it is only an understanding. You live into that extraordinary awareness all the time in your personal, professional, social life. But the moment you enter into the professional life, family life, the moment we interact with the world outside, with the people, with the time, situation, and the location. So we encounter that no, I am also individual, you are also individual. So there are many individuals. So my mind lives with that doubt. It is carried away by those impulses, those behavior. It does not recognize there is one real self. So he explains the metaphor. There is a pot space. The space inside the pot is the real self, and the pot space. If you put the water, it says the water space. Water can be empty, but the space cannot be made empty. The space is already there. You can put the water, you can put the tea in the pot. So that is an individual. This is what at the micro level. The same thing Master says that there is also a macro level. There is a one all pervading, one infinite consciousness as the great space, infinite space. And on that superimposed is the world. On the real self, superimposed is the body, mind, breath, intellect, and ego. On the one supreme consciousness, the entire world is superimposed. So first we filter out it is only a superimposition, and then we come to is the real self, is the supreme consciousness are one? Because consciousness is one, it cannot be divided. So there is only one consciousness, whether you say real self with reference to an individual or you say supreme consciousness with reference to the world. So he's taking us that how the four consciousnesses, so-called, can reach to, can make us understand that there is only one consciousness that is all pervading. That is the meaning we remove our ignorance. I told you a surprise element. So there is a surprise element because the real self is present here and now. And it is only one. Behind the speaker, behind the listener. I told you the story before. There were 10 students of a master living in a monastery. The master told all the 10 students to go to the village. You know, there is a tradition that you can directly enter into monkhood. You get initiated. Initiation means that now you have no relationship to the world. The monastery will take care of you, and you are under the guidance of a teacher. So that is the basic meaning of the monastery. It is a long retreat. We do a short-term retreat, we return again to the same stress. Oh, there is a trend everywhere. Even in India, I see that there is a trend. No, I went on vacation. Yes. Really? Did you vacate your mind? No, I had lot of problems in vacation. I will not go to that place in vacation. I will find another place. Oh, it's a trend. So what happens? You need not to work at all to earn your livelihood. You have to beg the food. So those 10 students were asked to go to the nearby village to beg the food. Uh, on the way, there is a river, so they have to cross the river. But Master warned them, you have to check all the 10 disciples, all the 10 students are always there. So after crossing the river, they wanted to check if all the 10 students are there or not. So one person started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He forgot to count himself. And he said, there are only 9 people. They started crying. Oh, no, no, let me count. They all counted and they found there are only 9 people. There is a surprise element, I'm saying you. There is nothing in this mindfulness. There is nothing in that awakening. So one wise man was passing through and he heard the conversation and he said, okay, no worries. I will find the 10th man. So the story is known as the 10th man in one Upanishad. Upanishad are the cream text. So once the mind stops the objectification, that means your mind is empty. If the mind recognizes there is an objectification by the mind, that very recognition helps you to be into that state. Because now you don't care the object. Who does it? Objectification. The mind by nature, it does the objectification. One mind becomes the subject and the other mind becomes the object. So whenever you objectify anything, what happens? Another part of the mind is also subjectifies. It becomes the knower. So the wise man said, okay, start counting. You come here. He called one disciple, one student, and he said, start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And he turned the finger to himself. He said, here is the 10th man. There is no object and there is no subject. You have found yourself. That is what who am I? Subject and object drops. That much is required. But I told you, surprise element. I told you in the very beginning, what is the biggest surprise? What is the biggest surprise? That one speaks about the real self. It is objectification. The teacher has to speak. So I'm objectifying the real self. That is a big surprise, which cannot be objectified. Teacher knows it. But how the teacher has to pass the knowledge? By objectification. And there is another surprise element that the student listens and does not understand. And the surprise is that it cannot be spoken and still the teacher speaks about it. I told you, we have 3,000 texts. More texts are coming. Master knows it cannot be objectified. Surprise even when the people listen to it, listen about it, and they realize it. So when we say that I'm not able to understand, it is only the objectification of the mind. You drop the objectification and you can realize. This is the message in this metaphor is there. So we have gone a step further because he is explaining at each step the space reflected in the water is the pot space totally concealed. There's a pot space. It will continue to remain there. So you put the water into it. That is an individual self conceals the real self. Why it conceals? Because I say I'm the body, mind, breath, intellect, ego, thought, stressed, angry, agitated. This is the water space. In this verse, he says, by the space reflected in the water is the pot space totally concealed. In the same way, the individual, as an individual, that real self is concealed. Concealed means superimposed. This principle is called the mutual superimposition. Mutual superimposition means what? As it appears, the real self takes some properties of the individual and claim that I'm the real self. The individual takes some properties of the real self and says that I'm the real self. Mutual superimposition. How to understand that? I told you it demands only an understanding. What is the nature of the iron ball? Another another example is given by the master. What is the nature of the iron ball? Iron bar is cool. Almost it is black in color. What is the nature of the fire? Red hot. Red in heat, isn't it? So now if I say the red hot iron ball, what it means? That ball has taken, as it though it did not, as it has taken some properties of the iron fire, and the fire has taken some properties of the iron ball. That is why we say it's a red hot iron ball. Iron cannot be hot. No, but how it fits into today's conversation? It fits there. Who are you? I'm Sam. I'm gendered. My gender, you see that. Oh, you have been the same since your birth? Yes, I have been the same since my birth, for example. Oh, so that is constant, but your body has changed. You see? Some properties have been transferred from the real self to the individual, from the individual to the real self. This is known as a superimposition. No, but after all, there is a red hot iron ball. You leave it out of the fire, it returns to its essential nature. Are you getting it? Say yes. Even if you don't get it, it's okay. Are you thinking about your stress? Last week you have been in stress. Some would say you are reading my mind. Do you see that you leave the iron ball? The redness and the heat are lost. You leave the fire independent of the iron ball. There is no shape of the fire. That understanding needs to be reflected upon again and again and again and again. Surprise element, I'm saying you, that we are the real self and we don't know. Teacher speaks about it, that cannot be spoken. And still the teacher speaks and the seekers realizes it. Don't get upset if you cannot realize. Now I have a short-term goal to realize how many hours you need. You have already objectified. It will take many births. You have already objectified. We need that awareness. I told you 10th man. How long it took those 10 students to recognize that they are 10, everyone is intact? How long? What practice they did? So this text, this teacher is calling to live into that extraordinary awareness. So the principle is called the mutual superimposition. The consciousness and the reflected consciousness stays in the same place. What it means? I'm trying to make everything clear. What it means by the, so there is one consciousness only. Now the consciousness needs the medium to reflect. You know, the sunlight cannot reflect on the hard surface, ground, but it reflects on the glass. So the same way the consciousness cannot reflect directly on the body, but it can reflect on a subtler medium, that is the mind. I'm talking of mutual superimposition. I don't need your 100% attention. I need your 200%. So that consciousness reflects in the intellect. So what is the medium? The intellect or the mind. Then there is a reflected consciousness. A reflected consciousness cannot work without the physical body. So we have a physical body. So the subtle body reflects that consciousness. It becomes a reflect. What is the reflected consciousness? A reflected consciousness means it is an individual that objectifies. Does moon has a moonlight? No. But still we say it is a moonlight. Does the mind has a consciousness? No, it's a matter. We have to contemplate and reflect again and again. Any thought is recognized because of that reflected consciousness. So whenever any thought comes, I said, from where you got this consciousness to recognize that I have a thought, that thought will disappear. No, you don't know, I have a lot of stress, I have a lot of challenges in my life. Who is recognizing it? Without consciousness, you cannot. Mutual superimposition. Drop that. Mind, stay there. You have a stress, stay there. I'm not doing anything. What happens to the mind? Mind is the moonlight. When we have that recognition, what do you mean by recognition? You know it again. What do you mean by knowing it again? First time, I know that this is me, means I'm the stress. Now I recognize it again. I'm not in stress. I drop the mutual superimposition. That is the meaning of recognition, if you find out. That is the meaning of recognition. But one thing we should understand, that consciousness and the reflected consciousness, this is what the master is teaching now. This consciousness and the reflected consciousness cannot be separated. You cannot destroy it. As long as we live, mind will be active. So that mind is the reflected consciousness. So I have to recognize behind that reflected consciousness. What I have to recognize? I'm the real self. You don't understand how much problem I have in my life. I know that. Think, my friends. Both exist at the same place. It is the pot space and the water space. That is why this metaphor is given. Now you understand the subtlety of this metaphor. Now there is a pot space cannot be destroyed, but the water space can be destroyed. It's changing. You put the water, You drop the water from the about space. The space remains as it is. The real self remains as it is. Mutual superimposition. Anywhere, anytime, in any situation, in any relationship. So-called that part space cannot be destroyed. Why? And why the water space can be, whatever is false can be falsified. You falsify through the reason, through understanding. Only the false can be falsified. The real cannot be falsified. Are you getting it? Say yes. Only the false can be falsified. I'm husband can be falsified. I'm wife can be falsified. I am stressed can be falsified. I am peace cannot be falsified. If I am peace and happiness, that cannot be falsified. It means I'm the peace and happiness. Real self is independent, all pervading, one consciousness. And the reflected consciousness is constantly changing. Why we use the word superimposition? They cannot be mixed. When I say red hot iron ball, they cannot be mixed. It's a mutual superimposition. If it is really mixed, then once you put the iron ball on a fire, it will remain hot, it will remain red. Do you understand that example? Similarly, the individual self and the real self, when I say mixed up, they cannot be mixed up. So we use the word superimposed. Why they cannot be mixed up? One real self is independent, all pervading. It does not depend on the mind or the real reflected consciousness, but the mind depends on the reflected consciousness. They have two different properties. If two objects have different properties, they cannot be mixed up. So why to worry if you have a lot of thoughts? Because you are none of them. But the reflected consciousness says, I am there and I have a stress. Do you see that? Say, yes, you see that. No worries, It's a long-term project. It's not a short-term project. It's not an instant in a junk food to the mind. Why it's not a junk food to the mind? Because mind has already accumulated the junk food since our birth. And after the session, you will accumulate more. What the Terry said, I forget. Forgetfulness is ignorance. Forgetfulness is misconception. Forgetfulness is superimposition. You know that you forget. Do you agree? You know that you forget. I'm talking about you, not what you forget. I'm talking about you. And you say, I forget. Is there a time that you have forgotten yourself? Tell me. Was there a time in the past? You forget what is the object. And the knower still knows that you forget and you still remember. That you cannot forget. That you is the real self. It cannot be mixed up. That's why we use the word superimposition. Why? They do not get mixed up, because the real self is independent, all-pervading consciousness, and the reflected consciousness in everywhere is different. Reflected consciousness means an individual is different. In you are an individual, I'm an individual, and it is nothing but the water space. Water space can be falsified. When the cup is full of water, do you see the space inside? No, I see the water. Can you destroy the water space? Yes. Throw the water out. What is left is the space. You have dropped all the objectification, and what that understanding has to be there. I have a lot of understanding in my life. I have been in stress for the last 10 years. What a great understanding you have. I should be appreciated. You should be awarded a degree. You don't understand, how much I'm going through. I'm talking about Mike. I received a message day before yesterday. You don't understand. You only talk about peace and happiness. I said, I have nothing more than that. Nothing less than that. I created 2 characters, otherwise people get upset. You're talking about me, you are insulting me. Oh, really? Who is getting insulted? The reflected consciousness. There is no insult in praise. I should endure. You insult me whenever I talk of the stress and anxiety and duality and a conflict. You insult me as much as possible. So I'm protecting the same reflected consciousness again. Pot space. Space is one that accommodates water space. Water space is what we call, give me a cup of tea. We forget the pot space. I remember the tea. I remember the coffee. I remember the juice. I remember what I said to you. I remember how you inserted me. I remember how you praised me, how you appreciated me. Real self doesn't need that. So from one objectification, from one superimposition, I accumulate millions of superimposition in my life. That is why I live in ignorance. Ignorance causes the suffering, and that is why I'm suffering. Mixing up of real or the false cannot happen. I told you, red hot iron ball, the best example. Leave the iron ball as it is. It will return. It returns to its natural state, and the fire loses the shape. So hot iron ball, in heat there is no shape. Fire is natural. You cannot say, I have seen rectangular heat, rectangular fire, or a circular fire, or a triangular fire. That needs only an understanding, a recognition. The moment you recognize you are there, you are already settled. The way, 10th man, here you are. When you are in stress, it means the dream girl married to a waking boy. Did you understand that? That marriage cannot take place. Dream boy, or you can say the dream girl and a waking boy. Can you ever say that I married to a dream girl that I saw in my dream? Marriage took place, is but a grand ceremony. That is the cause of our stress and suffering. Do you see mixing up in the superimposition? I'm using different phrases. Reflect consciousness appears to be mixed with the pure consciousness due to what thought comes to your mind? Ignorance, misconception. No, but my experience is real. Yes, in dream you marry a boy or a girl. That is real. For a dreamer it is real, for a waker it is unreal. Do you see that? You have falsified it. You have already falsified. No, but it's a different matter about the stress, you don't know. Everyone says, you don't know. Or you know it that you are in stress. Understand, my friend. So the reflected consciousness is the false I, and the real self, that part space is the real I. And reflected consciousness is the false I. If we falsify by understanding, by recognition, you need not to practice mindfulness, you are already there. So what it means in the entire world when we wake up and we think of the stress, anxiety, duality, reaction, it is all can be falsified easily. It can be falsified. That is why you are searching for peace and happiness. Is it not so? Tell me. Say yes, nod your head. It's a different matter after the session. You go into stress. And what can I say? I have nothing to say. It is your choice. It is your choice. Think, my friend. Non-thinker always lives in ignorance. Except the human race, no one has the ability to become a thinker. Means you invent the thought, you discover the thought that helps you to falsify what is right and what is wrong. That's why no animals can do yoga. I have seen, many websites, they say dog yoga. We cannot say those people, thank to them. We should appreciate at least they have introduced yoga to the God. To the dog, not to the dog. We continue to live into that ignorance. You start hopping, then that becomes a frog yoga. Unnecessary, So we deviate from the teachings of the masters. Close your eyes. Objectification. So I just recognize it is an objectification. When the teacher says, close your eyes, he's referring to the false I, the reflected consciousness. That much awareness is required. Out of the 10 students, when the one student is counting until the 9, he is objectifying, being comfortable. Being comfortable, so variety of experiences takes place. That is also an objectification, my friend. Remember the red hot iron bar. Remember the dream girl and the waker boy. Just remember this. I'm not saying you do this. Oh, that is what the sensation, comfort, and steadiness is there. Oh, yes. Then I set the space, pot space. The water is there in the pot, and still you recognize it is because of the pot space. Did you understand? That is why I used to make a statement that space is awareness and the awareness is the space. There is one continuous movement. There are no steps, but you can recognize those steps in the beginning. Because the moment you say that now move to the next step, it means you have started doing the practice. So I'm not using the step, being carefree. Oh, all these thoughts are coming and going. I watch them, I see them, I'm aware of them. Ah, it has to do with the water, space. Oh, this is an individual. This is the false I recognizing that I'm getting these thoughts and I get the thoughts, and after that there is a pause, there is an interval, and then the thoughts. It's like the dream girl and the waking boy. You recognize, I'm not saying you do the practice. Then the master puts another understanding that all these thoughts which are not complete are always repeated, which is an element of the stress, duality, and anxiety, even if you don't recognize. Oh, so it is objectification. It's a red hot iron ball. I need not to do it. Let the iron ball be placed outside the fire and recognize the natural state of the part space, the real self, and also recognize the natural functioning of the mind, the reflected consciousness. Thoughts are coming and going. Who cares? I is not attached to it. Means superimposition is not there. So you are there. My master used to say vichar, vichar, vichar in Hindi. So vichar means contemplate and reflect. You move from the non-thinker to a thinker. How come? The thought of the stress comes and you do not become a thinker. You take it for granted that there is a stress and how to manage it. And the journey of the stress continues. What is the thinker means? Thinker means, oh, stress belongs to the reflected consciousness. False I can be falsified. How it can be falsified? I was not in stress yesterday. Today I have, tomorrow I will not have it. It is constantly changing. What is changing can easily be falsified. What it means, we rise in consciousness from an individual, from a water space to a part space which cannot be falsified. Similarly, the entire world is the superimposition on the supreme infinite consciousness. So it is falsified at the macro level and at the micro level. So what happens? We are seeking that emptiness which always exists. You have seen that many mindfulness practices, it is effortless, and then they say focus on the breath. Focus is an effort. So you are projecting the emptiness, no projection. Projection can be falsified. It is always there. Part space is always there, even if it is full of water. Do you recognize it? It demands only a recognition, my friends. We are almost in a state of doing nothing. Consciousness cannot be ruled out, it cannot be falsified. You are listening to me, it means you are conscious, you are aware, not conscious in a negative sense. Now, because the consciousness is always there and the mind is always there as a medium, it has to reflect. So it is the reflected consciousness. So once the reflected consciousness becomes an enabler to the life force, to the body, and the journey of the objectification begins. Never comes to an end. It will never come to an end. Do you think that I don't have any thought? No, I have all kinds of thoughts. Mind, as long as the mind is there, enabler is there. But only I recognize that I'm the real self, I'm not the reflected consciousness. I'm sitting in my house, I'm not sitting in my neighbor's house. I believe you are getting it. Pure consciousness or the real self, the presence is an enabler to the mind, body, life force, intellect, thought, and the ego. Oh, just an awareness of the breath. You are looking casually, you are looking at the breath. Keep on, no worries. Keep on looking at the breath. Now see, you recognize the breath is the objectification, but that objectification takes place on something that is subject. It cannot happen if the subject is absent. You cannot say, here is a cup of water. The pot space is not there. How can you say, here you take the water? You're living into that awareness, simple awareness. So you are recognizing the reflected consciousness and its world outside, with the people, situation, time, place, relationship exist because of the part space, because of the consciousness. When I say I have a pain, for the pain, the subject is the body. You cannot say in air, in space, no, there is a pain. Reflected consciousness, mind cannot function without the presence of the consciousness. But where the mind is going, it lives in non-thinking mode. Then you are gone. Then we marry. Yeah, well, that's what I say. Dream girl with a waking boy. A recognition is required. And the moment you recognize that recognition is a natural falsification. So you are aware of the two words. That is the first realization that our master in this teaching wants us to recognize the two words. One is the mere presence of the consciousness, other is the reflected consciousness uh, as an individual, as a thought, as a objectification. There are two. Mixing up red hot iron ball. I tell you, the heat and the fire cannot be ball, cannot be, they do not have any shape. You recognize that. When you recognize the stress and the duality in a thought doesn't have any validity, you validate any thought with reference to the world, relations, people, stress, pain, anxiety. The journey to the ignorance continues, and then we fall into the stress and the suffering for hours and hours and hours together. We are looking at the breath. So, see, from one objectification, you are looking at the breath, one objectification. Then we do that, we make the mind subtler. How to make the mind subtler? You are aware of the breath going in and out. You are aware of the quality of the breath. You are aware of the sensation of the breath. What happens? You also become aware of the space behind that breath on which this breath is moving. If there is no space, how can the breath move? Does the 10th man story fits here? Yes. You are aware of the breath. You are aware of the breath in the body. You are aware of the breath going in and out. You are aware of the sensation of the breath going in and out. You are aware of the quality of the breath. You are aware of the pitch of the breath. And then everything stops. Why it stops? You are aware of the space on which the breath is taking place. You are aware of the unchanging space on which the changing breath is playing. That is so simple. Again, I'm repeating for the sake of recognition with an example of the breath is moving in and out, one objectification, you feel the sensation, second objectification, you know the quality of the breath, another objectification, you know the breath is going in the body, another objectification, you know the breath is going in my body and coming out of it, another objectification, you recognize that the breath is going into my lungs, it cannot go into my belly, another objectification, go on. You start with one objectification that I have a stress. You have millions of thoughts are waiting for you to prove that you are definitely stressed. You are suffering. And the moment you recognize 9 students and the 10th man pointing to yourself, you are pointing to the space on which the breath takes place. For the reflected consciousness, it is totally dependent on the real self. Real self is independent. Whether the reflected consciousness sees that I'm in stress and suffering, it doesn't make any change to the real self, my friends. Really? What did that mean? You keep the red hot iron ball outside the fire. That heat dissolves, goes away. That redness goes away. What is left is the emptiness. That is the real, true state of the mindfulness. That is what Buddha talks of mindfulness. That is what Buddha talks of nothingness. It is not cultivated. Any cultivated mind emptiness is, you can complete the sentence. You already understand. What space is not cultivated? It is there. Water space, yes. Tea space, yes. Vodka space, yes. Mm. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Bring your mind on the right hand. You see objectification, but awareness is already there. But that is the way we have to use the language. There is no other way. So we see that consciousness behind that verbal expression. Move the mind on the left hand, lift your both the palms, place it on your eyes, open your eyes and stay. Know your experiences, bring the hands down. We'll share our experiences. If you have any doubt or question, we can ask. How are you, Stephen?
Good, thank you. Um, it was interesting because I've been thinking about everything we've talked about all week long, um, and just today, I wanted to just look at this because there's always this tendency of us complicating things, um, and we've always talked, and I've shared with you before about the fact that I enjoy Eastern wisdom because it's so simple, yet we complicate it. So when you started talking today, I had this moment of basically pulling back to the conversation we've had about perception and reality, and how do we simplify, or how do I simplify that to myself? And what I came to was the fact that there is only one reality, and that's the real self, and everything else is perception or false. And it's what we interpret or what we think, all based on past impressions and the impurities of the mind. So therefore, it's now this understanding that if I am peace and I am happiness, go back to the lessons of what we're not and what we're supposed to negate and what it is. It's pretty much everything. It's
Yes,
peace.
yes,
I
you're
am
right.
peace. I am happiness, and
Yes,
and anything else could be measured against that. And it was as if as soon as you stopped and we closed our eyes, there wasn't another thought. Like that was what was going on during your talk. And even though you talked through this whole the entire time, as soon as my eyes closed, it was like it was just shut down, and then it was over.
beautiful. Yes, that should happen. We do not move. We are not the doer. We are not the enjoyer. Who is the enjoyer? Reflected consciousness. Who is the doer? Reflected consciousness. Who is in stress? Reflected consciousness. So by thinking, by recognition, by being aware, if you negate it, why do you negate it? It can be negated. If it cannot be negated, then once you are in stress, you are always in stress. Some people say I'm always in stress. That's a different issue. How are you? Very good, Stephen. Very good for it. How are you, David?
Thank you. Very good. Yeah, I mean, just to Stephen's point further, that was kind of my realization, is that how complicated we make things. And just when we were in the meditation there, I'm just like, this is so simple. Why am I making it complicated? And that process just got me to a very deep latter half of my meditation. And I think we just overcomplicate things.
Yeah, yeah. So what is required? Not any practice, not any medication, not a cup of vodka. It requires you start thinking. Do not complicate the matter again. You're rightly said. Wonderful. How are you? Yeah.
Sir, I'm good. Thank you. I think similar to what Stephen and David are both saying, what the meditation for me was an awareness of the space. So as you guided through the meditation, I would notice whether it was the breath, but then I would notice the space.
Yeah.
And then I'd notice the body and then the space.
Yeah.
And so constantly going back to the space.
Beautiful. Constantly going to the space. In another word, another master says that you go to the ultimate cause of everything. Ultimate cause. When any thought comes, I'm just aware of the breath. Okay. What is the ultimate cause? If there is no space, you cannot move the breath. Finished. The moment you recognize, and all the stress just dissolves. Beautifully put. How are you, Dennis?
I'm good, and I have a question.
Yeah.
When I say that I recognize the space behind the breath, this is still an objectification, right?
Yes.
Because there is someone who recognizes, and there is an object, the space.
Right, please said.
So it is the false self asserting that he, the false self, recognizes the
That
space.
too is rightly said.
So
So
what is
I
the way
haven't,
to move
I haven't,
from?
I have an urge to go to the restroom. I went to the restroom. The thought disappeared. So by one thought from the reflected consciousness, we approach the other thought so that both the thoughts are dissolved. If you have a thorn pierced into your right big toe, what you do? You use another thorn, you use another needle to remove it. Obviously, mind is a communication language. We have to use the language. We have to use the same false mind to falsify itself. What is left then? There is no thought. 10th man, that is what I told you. Here you are, the 10th. Oh, what happened? Now that all the confusion has gone, should I again think, where is the 10th guy? No, I recognize it. Yes, we have to use the thought. That is why we have 3,000 texts. And every thought have to be used to falsify in the field of awareness. What is left is awareness. How are you, Brandy?
I'm good, thank you. I'm always impressed how our reflections kind of come together, because the word that stood out, or that stood out to me today, was recognition, right? And something we've talked about before, which is how like simple it is, but not easy. So just kind of along the lines of what everyone else has said, it's not complicating it too much, and getting behind it, right? I don't, yeah. Good to be back. I missed everyone. I'm going to objectify you and tell you I missed you.
No, you do not miss everyone. You miss yourself. That's wonderfully put. How are you, Sam?
Good. Meditation was good. Very, very light for me today. The only challenge for a second was there was a moment where I just felt my jaw lock up intensely for a second, but it kind of released itself. That was it. Everything else was thoughtless and easy.
Easy. Remain easy from today onward. Good. How are you, Ashok?
Sir, peace and happiness.
Very good.
And fine, cool.
Fine and cool. I could see your face. It's happening. Beautiful.
Thank you.
How are you, Vaibhav?
Thank you, sir. Sir, mine was calm, easy, very relaxed.
Very relaxed. You see, oh, we have Terry. Why I forgot Terry. So I is still present and Terry forgetfulness. Terry, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm here. And I don't remember saying whatever it was, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, it all made sense to me, and I was just there.
You were just there. That too, that is the beauty. You are just there. So you remain always there.
Uh-huh.
It happens. It happens. Remember those metaphors when we are surrounded by any form of anxiety, duality, and a conflict. Do not stretch it more. That is the meaning you all share, that we complicate the matters. We complicate the matter. If you have an anxiety, find a thought that will falsify the anxiety. Don't start explaining, I have 10 reasons to be anxious. Do you see that point? So one objectification, you are using one objectification, as Dennis was saying, you are using another objectification. Both are false. So they will dissolve by themselves. What is left? Real self, part space. That is all. Thank you for tolerating. You have been tolerating enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Peace.